day off from the allotment today, so I've come to Mottisfont Abbey to enjoy the sunshine. Now it's May, so everything's starting to bloom, so let's have a little look around. This is the walled garden. Now it's well known for its roses, and as you can see they're all in bloom. I'm just hoping that my climbing rose turns out as good as this one.
Mottisfont has become enormously popular over recent years. It's become much more of an all-year-round visitor attraction. So there was a desperate need for additional space.
Our new visitor facility is really going to transform the experience for visitors when they come to Mottisfont.
And I think it's a little bit about how visitor expectations have changed as well. They want a proper good warm welcome with really good facilities, toilets, proper visitor welcome, and also when they leave, so the shop being near their car.
The decision was taken that something new was needed. A lot of attention was put to where that should be. Initially it was looked in the home farmyard, eventually concluded it should be adjoining the car park, and that's where it's now being built.
For a start, there's going to be lots more room for them. We've always had really small facilities. There's actually a space in the middle of the visitor centre, so there's two separate buildings and a lovely kind of courtyard with nothing in it but some benches just to sit down and get your bearings. That's going to be fantastic.
It's taken us so long because really we just want to get it right and absolutely do the right thing that's in keeping with Mottisfont and the wonderful property that we enjoy today.
We've designed buildings to be sustainable, both in their energy use and also in the materials that they're constructed from. So we've gone for predominantly timber, it's a timber frame building, but also steel. Part of the building is steel clad, and we used as a reference local agricultural and forestry buildings that you might find on the edge of a large estate such as Mottisfont. The steel clad finish to the bigger building, the shop, is actually what's called Core 10. It's a weathering steel, and it's actually designed to go rusty. It's intentional. That protects the steel, makes it last a long time, but in fact it will also develop the colour. The pattern will develop over time, and it'll turn a lovely dark sort of deep red brown colour.
Choice of materials was partly a practical one because of where it's built on the floodplain. It has to be raised, and therefore it can't be of a substantial masonry construction. And then it was really looking at what would be appropriate materials to get the right feeling for a subsidiary structure in the landscape. I think that's a really important point because it's not the main house. It shouldn't read as the main house or the stables. It should read as something else in the landscape.
The walkway is going to be a really nice part of the building as well, because that takes people from the central courtyard right into the heart of the property.
The surface of the walkway is timber clad, but it has a non-slip surface within it in order to stop people skidding and sliding around on it. There'll be planting on either side of it, so it'll be much more subtle than it looks like at the moment.
Mottisfont was bought in the 1930s by Gilbert and Maud Russell, and Maud Russell had an amazing eye for colour. He wanted to reflect her sense of style, her sense of place. So we've gone for warmer, earthier colours with accents within them to reflect exactly how the family might have approached it if it had still been them who was building a new structure in the landscape.
A great advantage of the shop moving down to this location is that of course it frees up the coach house, the big space at the back of the stables. So when the shop moves in January, we'll immediately start work to refurbish that area as a secondary cafe. It'll give us around 70 more seats for catering inside, which we desperately need, and then lots more seats also outside, and it'll offer light bites, lunches, sandwiches, that sorts of thing. It's going to be a different offer to the kitchen cafe, which will still have the full meals. And the other thing that's going to be different is it will be totally disposable, but very green disposable. So these are things that will be able to be composted or disposed of in a very, very green way. The ice cream parlour, which at the moment sort of goes between being the stirrup cup with winter warmers in the winter and the ice cream parlour in the summer, that'll go back to just offering scoop ice creams, and it'll just be open when the weather is lovely.
The funding comes from the National Trust. This is a specific set of funding for our new visitor facilities that we will pay back over a long period of time. This doesn't affect any donations or gift aid that comes to the property or the National Trust. This is entirely separate funding. The investment of course makes business sense. What it will enable us to do is so much more as a property. In simple terms, if we are selling more cups of tea, pieces of cake, sandwiches, then all of that money will not only go towards paying back our wonderful new facilities, but it will go towards paying for so much more of the conservation work we do in the house, in the gardens and around the wider estate.
So our lovely new visitor centre is all going to open on January the 8th. The new Coach House Cafe will open in early February so that we're all ready for half term, and we are really looking forward to finally having enough places for people to sit down when they want to eat something with us. The new visitor centre is really just the start. This building is going to enable us to do all sorts of things for our visitors and far more in the future.
Mottisfont Abbey is one of the most ancient gardens in Hampshire. Founded as a priory in the 11th century on the Pilgrims Road from Salisbury to Winchester, it was first a victim of the havoc caused by the Black Death, before finally being suppressed in 1536. It was later bought and sold by several landed families and rebuilt over the centuries. In 1957, the abbey, with its 2,000 acres, was endowed to the National Trust, and so began a new chapter in its history. The abbey is bounded by the hamlet of Mottisfont and a swiftly flowing branch of the River Test. It was once a thriving, self-contained community with butcher, baker and blacksmith, but since the turn of the century, the population has been halved as village life declined. A deep spring of natural crystal clear water in the abbey grounds gave the place its name. The Saxon freemen held their moots around the font, hence Mottisfont. The water surges out of the font at the rate of 200 gallons a minute, and almost always at the same temperature, a steady 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a lovely, tranquil garden, but the feature in springtime lies in a great blue carpet under an avenue of pleached limes. It's been created by planting thousands of Chinodoxas, a small, hardy, bulbous plant from the mountains of Turkey. In the wild, it flowers as the snow melts, hence its English name, Glory of the Snow. The individual flowers are star-shaped with a white centre. It's hard to imagine a greater contrast than the wild mountain home of this little plant and the placid grounds of an English abbey.
Hampshire, over the Wessex Downs, across Salisbury Plain, to another tiny village called Mottisfont. It is here on the manicured grounds of Mottisfont Abbey that England's eminent Rosarian Graham Stuart Thomas assembled for the National Trust the largest collection of ancestral species and 19th century rose cultivars in the world. Mottisfont Abbey, or to be more precise, the Priory of Holy Trinity, was consecrated in the year 1224, though archaeological evidence suggests that it existed for quite some time earlier. Over the centuries, the house itself has undergone a number of architectural changes and has passed through many hands, including those of Henry VIII's Lord Chamberlain, William Lord Sands. The site, well chosen by the Austin canons for their priory, is secluded and sheltered. Walking the impeccably groomed lawns, it is easy to imagine being transported back through the centuries. A sense of timeliness and serenity is heavy in the air. You can tell by the towering size and spread of the trees that populate Mottisfont that they are indeed ancient. Superb specimens of English oak, sweet chestnut, copper beech, and hornbeam cast huge dappled shadows across the bright green carpet of compact grass. With all this history around us, we are, however, going to fast forward to the 20th century and the year 1972. It was in the spring of that year, within the mellow brick walls that originally housed the Priory's kitchen garden, that Graham Stuart Thomas's collection of old roses would find a permanent home. It's as though this climbing rose over the modest entrance gate is beckoning us to cross the threshold into this enclosure of extraordinary beauty. This is the National Trust Rose Garden at Mottisfont. Unlike Hidcote, a map is not really essential to finding your way around because, as you see here, the design couldn't be more simple. The original garden is divided by intersecting pathways into 4 almost symmetrical lawns, each surrounded by spacious beds. The second garden above has a series of straight pathways radiating from a central arbor. Because most of the old roses at Mottisfont bloom only once a year, varieties of shrubs and perennials are planted in the borders around the lawns and down the long, wide borders that flank the central path. These provide continuing color through the spring and summer months. Although the allure of Mottisfont is principally in its roses, these herbaceous borders are certainly among the finest in any English garden. In this one, we counted no less than 30 different varieties of perennials, halfway up one side alone. But what makes them especially appealing is the painterly skill in which the colors are blended. Clumps of soft green Alchemilla mollis rub shoulders with showy pink drifts of the lovely geranium Claridge Druce, Dianthus and Erigeron. And of course, the indispensable silvery lamb's ears mixing amicably with all of them. Cheerful yellows are provided in part by dabs of iris, Cicerinchium, and tall Cephalaria, with sprays of frothy white Cramby cordifolia creating the backdrop. Now and then a rose blossom will nod among this happy medley of colors, as here, mixed in with these campanulas and dianthus. The effect, as you can see, is extraordinarily beautiful. Roses. So many, in fact, that it becomes intoxicating. They scramble over walls, engulf pergolas, hug the ground, invade trees, overtake trellises, and totally overwhelm the senses. Often hybrid families are grouped together. Varieties of Rosa gallica line one path, richly scented damask another, hybrid perpetuals, Bourbons, Portlands, and moss. They all assert their powerful collective presence with full-blown blooms, exquisite colors, and formidable fragrance. Unlike most modern roses, these have been graced with names that somehow seem befitting to flowers of such beauty. Most of them of French origin, many of them named for women. In a nostalgic discourse on rose names in his book The Glory of Roses, Alan Lacey wrote, I have a persistent fantasy that in a garden of old roses I might, late one evening, discover the women themselves, returned to life for an hour or so, walking the paths among the roses, inhaling the perfume and talking softly among themselves. I would love to eavesdrop on Marie de Blois, Madame de la Roche-Lambert, Lady Mary Fitzwilliam and Lucy Bertram.
Mottisfont's stunning rose garden contains over 300 varieties of roses, mainly those from 19th century France. It also includes certain species roses and hybrids so ancient that some are actually classified as prehistoric. Many of the roses in this breathtaking garden are varieties acquired by Napoleon's first wife Josephine for her collection at Malmaison. Hers was a love affair with roses that even transcended the warring between England and France. It has been recounted that while English warships were blockading the coast of France, the English nurseryman John Kennedy was allowed unimpeded passage to and fro across the Channel to supply large quantities of roses for Josephine's garden. Such is the power of the rose, which, by the way, also happened to be Josephine's middle name.
Among the myriad visual delights with which Mottisfont rewards the visitor, this tableau is invariably one of the most memorable. Sprawling joyously across a brick wall, the buxom blooms of the fragrant English shrub rose Constance Spry frame the white Windsor bench. The eye cannot escape this charming scene as it is drawn down the line of waist-high box hedges that contain dense bushes of gallica and moss roses. Dazed by all this beauty, the sound of water captures the ear, coming from where the two main paths intersect. The central pool is an inviting and pleasant place to take a rest and let this sensuous onslaught sink in. While the pool itself is a simple statement, the low spreading habit of the ground cover rose, Robritta, dresses it up in June with a mantle of almost solid color. The blossoms, like small porcelain cups, burst forth to engulf one side of the pool entirely. In a world of gardening, it is difficult to imagine a more lovely sight than the soft colors of old roses and bold clematis splashed against the rustic red of aging brick. The sweetly scented rampant climber, Paul's Himalayan musk, smothers this 20-foot section of wall. The lovely Viticella clematis, Étoile de Violette in its full glory. The 1894 hybrid perpetual Captain Haywood, they all say it so eloquently. A handful of apple trees, survivors from the original kitchen garden, now act as hosts to shrub and rambling roses. This enormous Gallica hybrid complicata certainly seems to have found a happy home. And this magnificent display, put on by Andersonii, an immediate relative of the common dog rose, is overpowering to say the least. Another more practical method of training these more spirited varieties is on rough-hewn wooden supports that you see here in the back of this armillary sphere. Look what happens some years later when this hybrid musk rambler Félicité et Perpétue takes over. Let's wander through this inviting arch in the brick wall into the second garden. Created a little over 10 years ago, here the scheme is more open and informal. Gone are the box hedges and lawns. The paths are wider, even a different gravel, grey in color, and occasionally we encounter stepping stones of wide granite slabs, edged with dwarf lavender and nepeta. The figurative center of the garden is this airy arbor, or bower as the Victorians knew them. A handsome black iron bench surrounds a hedge filled with the original Portland rose. The ramblers debutante and blue magenta take turns scrambling up the 8 oak posts. In a corner, tucked in behind these dazzling heads of Allium Christophii, with their masses of star-shaped flowers, we catch a glimpse on the left of one of the small tile-roof summer houses, created as a refuge from the occasional shower. With a major musical concert planned for his garden that evening, we were fortunate indeed to catch a few moments with Mottisfont's head gardener David Stone. We asked him first what the early days were like in the transition from kitchen garden to rose garden.
Yeah, the rose garden started off life as a vegetable garden. It supplied fruit and vegetables to the house at Mottisfont Abbey for the best part of 250 years. And in 1972, when the gardens were acquired by the National Trust, they retained the framework of paths and box hedges and yew trees and removed most of the soft fruit from the garden and developed the fruit beds as rose beds. Well, one of the advantages of developing a rose garden in what was a fruit and vegetable garden is that one, you've got a good deep soil which has been well dug and manured for many, many years. And secondly, one has already got established trees. Some of the large fruit trees have been retained for training climbing and scrambling roses through. The large herbaceous borders which flank the central path were developed in the 1930s and were designed mainly to provide cut flowers for the house. So not only did the garden provide fruit and vegetables, but also cut flowers.
We then asked the same question that we did at Headcote. What about the future of the garden? Adding new roses and propagation.
We have the National Collection of shrub roses, and the trouble is with any collection of any kind is that it keeps on growing. And we acquire varieties of roses from all over the world, from as far apart as East Germany, Japan, China, Bermuda. And they are propagated at Mottisfont and assessed for a number of years. And if we find that they are true to variety, they are added to the collection.
We felt it would not be right to leave Mottisfont without showing you, close up, some of the roses that grace this most beautiful of gardens. It's fitting that we start with Graham Thomas, the lovely yellow rose named after the garden's creator. It was these same old roses that inspired Candace Wheeler to write in 1902. It is curious when one comes to think of it, how large a space the rose idea occupies in the world. It has almost a monopoly of admiration. In love and in literature, ancient and modern, it is a leading figure. There's a mysterious something in its nature, an inner fascination, a subtle witchery, a hidden charm which it has and other flowers have not. The rose ensnares and holds the love of the world.